Tonight, the Treasurer starts the budget sell as fears grow over public service belt tightening. Hello, I'm Guy Stayner. This is ABC News. Also tonight, telcos, tech companies and banks to face hefty fines for failing to stop scams. Confusion and concern about how much elderly Australians are set to pay for home care services. And stepping out of the capsule for the first ever civilian spacewalk. Treasurer Michael Ferguson has begun the big task of selling his third budget, which sets the state on course to accumulate $8.6 billion of debt in 4 years. He's facing backlash over the debt, but also from public servants worried about how departments will find $450 million worth of savings over the next 4 years.
A big workload weighs heavy on public school teacher Laura Russell.
Working in this system, I now feel like I let students down all of the time because I'm not given the opportunity to give them the support that they need to take those next steps in their lives.
Yesterday's budget requires the Education Department to find $80 million in savings over the next 3 years, with teachers and support staff worried about what programs and jobs face the axe.
I'm a teacher, but I can't do my job without TAs, without our admin staff, without our facilities staff. I just don't see how anyone who works directly in a school could be anything other than a frontline staffer. So there's nothing there that can be cut without having an adverse impact on all of our students.
Launceston General Hospital nurse Chantel Smith shares the same anxiety as the Health Department tries to save $134 million in 3 years.
If I had the pressures of knowing that there's going to be more staff cuts and not supporting us, our roles as nurses are going to be a lot heavier.
Treasurer Michael Ferguson has begun his budget sell. He says there's fat to cut in the public service, and savings from the efficiency measure only make up 1.6% of expenditure.
We believe that the bureaucratic side of a big department can be more efficient.
The state isn't projected to balance the books until the end of the decade. The Treasurer says it's then that work will start on reducing soaring debt levels, projected to reach $8.6 billion in 4 years' time.
The return to surplus is beyond the forward estimates. I accept that, and I've explained why. But when you return to a proper surplus, that's the point, when you cap out your borrowings. And that's the plan.
I don't think you can believe the figures in this budget. I think every budget update we will see in this financial year will see further deterioration in the position.
The government's ruled out huge spending cuts to balance the budget or introducing new taxes to increase revenue. But the Treasurer isn't closing the door on selling a government business enterprise if the right deal comes along, although he's ruled out parting with Hydro Tasmania.
We'd be open to an individual asset being considered, but only if it was in the overall best interest of the state. We certainly don't need to sell assets to service debt.
History will tell us that is a public disaster. That would be the worst thing for Tasmanians if any of our fantastic GBEs were flogged off.
A budget being marked harshly. Adam Langenberg, ABC News.
Treasurer Michael Ferguson is promising the $240 million of federal funding earmarked for the Macquarie Point Stadium precinct will be made GST exempt. The funding was announced last year and is contingent on the state government upgrading surrounding wharf infrastructure. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers had declared the funding would not be GST exempt, meaning Tasmania would receive a smaller share of GST revenue in future years. But today Mr Ferguson insisted it's a matter of when, not if, the full amount of the funding will be made exempt, and that the current decision could be reversed by a future coalition federal government.
I have spoken to Mr Dutton about it. I won't put words in his mouth, but we'll get it eventually, and it's not too late. There's still 3 GST updates to come annually. There's still 3 more to come. There are still 3 more opportunities. I'm not going to give up.
Tech companies, banks and telcos could face massive fines if they fail to protect their customers from scams. They'll also be liable for victim compensation under new laws proposed by the Albanese government.
Just weeks before buying his first property, Ilya Fomin lost $280,000 to a scam.
It was such a huge shock, you do not feel much.
Criminals stole his money after they emailed him impersonating his lawyer. He believes the two banks used to shift the funds could have done more.
They didn't check neither the address nor the name, and they just let the money go.
His bank maintains it did nothing wrong.
I believe that if our people had seen those red flags, they absolutely would not have processed the payment.
Banks will have to ensure that they are confirming the identity of a payee when a transfer is being made.
With Australians losing billions every year, the government is demanding action from banks, telcos and tech companies.
We'll ensure that Australia is leading the world in the fight against scams.
New obligations will cover how to prevent, detect, report, disrupt and respond. If companies fail, they could be forced to pay compensation and fined up to $50 million. The banks pushed hard to have other sectors on the hook. Telcos will have to combat dodgy texts and calls, and digital platforms verify advertisers. Both will also be liable.
It's more likely to prevent scams from ever starting, and it's a much fairer way of attributing liability.
Consumer groups have reacted positively, but are pushing to ensure most victims are repaid.
A model that incentivises businesses to fortify their systems and protect their customers.
Key details, including exactly what this means for future scam victims, is still being worked out. But despite that, the government wants to pass the laws this year. Michael Atkin, ABC News.
It's been described as a once-in-a-generation reform for aged care, allowing more Australians access to support at home. But the proposed scheme comes at a cost, with some recipients having to pay thousands of dollars more each year.
Sue Watts lives alone in the suburbs of Hobart, but twice a week the 70-year-old gets a helping hand from a support worker.
For services such as domestic cleaning and help to get to medical appointments.
Home care packages allow people like Sue to maintain independence at home rather than rely on residential care.
If I didn't have them, I'd feel really lost and alone. I don't have a lot of family to support me.
But the home care system is under severe strain, with a growing wait list of more than 60,000 people.
I know of a case at the moment of a 95-year-old woman who is being told she's going to have to wait a year just to be assessed. At 95, she doesn't have a year to wait.
The federal government has now unveiled a multi-billion-dollar reform package to expand access to an extra 300,000 people over the next decade.
Home care packages involve three types of service categories: clinical care such as nursing and physiotherapy, support for independence like respite and transport, and everyday living including cleaning, meals delivery and gardening. Under the proposed Support at Home scheme, recipients wouldn't have to contribute any funds for clinical care, but the other categories would be means tested, meaning a part pensioner would pay between 5 and 50% of independence services, while a self-funded retiree would cover 80% of everyday living services. A no worse off principle would apply for those already receiving support, but some new recipients would have to contribute thousands of dollars each year.
And the reality is we do have people who are utilising aged care that do have significant super balances, who do have assets.
There's not enough information. I don't know, I'm really scared. I don't know how much more I'm going to have to find.
The government wants the reforms in place by mid-next year. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
An inquiry into the unlawful robo-debt scheme has found a dozen public servants breached their code of conduct 97 times. The Public Service Commissioner has made findings against 12 current and former staff, with sanctions imposed against 4 who remain employed with the department. The Commissioner says former Department Secretary Catherine Campbell failed to seek legal advice and created a culture that prevented robo-debt being scrutinised. The report also made findings against former Secretary Renee Leon, who is now the Vice-Chancellor of Charles Sturt University. The robo-debt scandal led to $1.7 billion being unlawfully collected from millions of social security recipients.
The vast majority of public servants are good people, working hard to serve you, the community, every day. Public servants made mistakes. We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it and work together to make sure those mistakes won't happen again.
The Defence Minister is being accused of throwing lower-ranked army officers under the bus with his decision to strip medals over alleged murders in Afghanistan. Richard Marles is standing by the move and today hit out at anti-war protesters, again trying to disrupt an international weapons expo in Melbourne. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
An anti-war protester cements her arm to a car and blocks the entrance to Melbourne's Kingsway Bridge.
Land forces will be abolished!
Police eventually chisel her free. One of several activists still trying to disrupt a weapons fair where the Defence Minister was today the VIP guest.
Difficult decisions require leadership. That's what I've done as the Minister for Defence.
Attending the International Land Forces Expo,
they're all high explosive as well.
Richard Marles defends his decision this week to strip several army officers of medals for alleged Afghanistan war crimes that occurred under their command.
Well, why is it okay to throw sort of lower ranked diggers under the bus, but those who are higher up the chain avoid any scrutiny?
The former Defence Minister turned opposition leader also attacking the timing of the long-awaited announcement so soon after the Veteran Suicide Royal Commission.
I think Richard Marles really has done a great disservice here to the Australian Defence Force.
Whenever we were doing it, it was going to be a difficult moment.
With the three-day weapons convention now finished, the government has taken aim at those who've used violence in the protests outside, describing their actions as utterly unacceptable. Today, anti-war activists were joined by a Green senator.
I'd say to Richard Marles, have the courage and come out and speak to the people who vote for you, not the multinationals who you want a job from when you leave politics.
This year, we have watched the Greens throw their lot in with thuggery time and time again.
And he insists those in the weapons trade are actually keeping every Australian safe. Andrew Green, ABC News, Melbourne.
Well, the Tasmanian government has just handed down a controversial budget that flies in the face of a recent independent economic review. I sat down with the Treasurer, Michael Ferguson, to ask why and discuss the state's economic future. Michael Ferguson, thanks for your time. One of the nation's most respected economists comprehensively reviewed the state's finances, recommending increasing revenue and cutting infrastructure spending. Why have you ignored Saul Eslake's key recommendations?
I also respect Saul Eslake. I regard him as a fine Tasmanian, and I enjoyed reading his report. I found it was a useful and a commentary on state finances that's worth the read. But
so why is he wrong?
People who respect each other don't have to always agree. The government, the Liberal government, believes that we need to chart our way through these economic headwinds that we're in right now. We warned about them last year. Last year's settings, we need to preserve them, supporting people with cost of living, meeting our election commitments, which are all about health and education, housing, and meeting those cost of living pressures. We take a different view on revenue. We want the state economy to grow, including by the use of the infrastructure pipeline, to keep the jobs moving forward, build the productive assets that a growing state should have, and over time return to a balanced budget position. We believe that putting up taxes actually is the wrong time during a period of sustained high inflation. I don't think your viewers would appreciate it if we did that.
Unions are furious with the $450 million efficiency dividend. Why are you making departments choose which services to cut?
Well, they're responsible under the state legislation for managing a departmental budget. We look to those qualified, well-paid people who are running those big departments to make sensible strategic decisions about how they can use the resources that they're being provided with. It's not my money, it's taxpayers' money. We want to make sure that we extract maximum value for that funding. Now, before we just accept a lobbyist or a union's or a Labor Party's claim that we're cutting, let me quickly say we're investing more. Those departments will have more money, but we want them to do more with it, and it's about efficiency, not cuts.
Health is looking to find $134 million in savings. Where is health going to find those kind of savings?
Health is a massive department with a huge number of people and consultants and advertising budgets. You know, we believe that the bureaucratic side of a big department can be more efficient. We've said to the health department, turn that efficiency into a resource that you can keep. In the case of health, their new funding is 4 times larger than the savings we've asked them to make. But we just want more frontline and more frontline service and less of the sorts of things that departments can do less of that are about efficiencies. And really, quite honestly, I think there'd be very few Tasmanians that wouldn't see the common sense there.
The Macquarie Point Stadium is listed in the budget as one of the main expenditure risks for the state. Why is the stadium a budget risk?
Well, you know, Treasury are meant to wear the black hat, and they do this every year. They've done it with every major project in the 10 years I've been experienced as a minister, and they did it before when I was in opposition.
So what's the budget risk with the stadium?
Well, let me just say, even with the previous government, and probably you could go back for many decades and see that Treasury's job is to tell the readers of the budget papers what are the things that you need to really carefully manage. And I think that's the closing sentence in the Macquarie Point Urban Renewal Precinct project. The final sentence says this project risks, you know, need to be carefully managed. We agree with that, and that's the whole point. Going ahead with a project, carefully manage it. Treasury doing its job just like they did with the Bridgewater Bridge and the Royal Hobart Hospital, which I played major roles in. They raised the same risks, and good on them for doing so.
Carefully manage the project. That's a euphemism for it's in danger of blowing out.
It actually isn't, Guy. That's not how it works. No, the Treasury raise risks. The bigger the project...
Well, surely a risk means that it is in danger of blowing out.
It's really not what it means. The bigger the project, the more you need to be focused on managing risks, because every project, big and small, has risks. You need to manage them. Treasury are not sounding an alarm. They're raising a risk, as they ought to, and as they've done with every other big project we've ever done.
Debt is rising to $8.6 billion over the forward estimates. What is a serviceable level of debt for Tasmania?
Well, first of all, that is serviceable. We have the lowest debt, no surprises there, we're the smallest state, but we also have the third lowest debt.
But people are screaming about debt levels all around the state. So what is a maximum serviceable level of debt? I'm assuming it's not at $100 billion, but is it 10? Is it 20?
Guy, some people are screaming about it because there's political opportunism at play. But we're prepared...
Even the Chamber of Commerce and Industry wants you to do a lot more to actually bring the budget back into line.
I think what they've said is that the debt needs to be sustained. If it's going to be building assets, make sure they're productive and well strategically chosen projects, and I agree with that. We are, you know, I could turn a surplus very quickly. It would not be hard, but it would create significant social disruption. I saw that when I was in opposition in 2011, when we saw 20 schools on the chopping block, entire wards of hospitals shut down and mass sackings of nurses. We're not prepared to do that. We want to chart the course in a sensible way. We know that the national economy has softened. Because of those federal policies, the Premier and I, we are not prepared to allow Tasmania to suffer because of that. We realise we need to find that sustainable path back to a balanced budget, a surplus budget, and we'll get there, but we're doing so in a measured way, and it does involve as well some tough decisions, including the one that you raised with me earlier, where the unions aren't happy. We've had to find a balance, and we believe it is affordable and manageable, but you know, I don't take a lazy view to debt. I think you need to manage it very carefully.
You're renowned as a calm and polished media performer. How are you holding up after a pretty rough couple of months?
Well, you know, Tasmanians elect us to do the job. I think I'm good at listening to people, and I want to be a faithful, honourable person representing them, and be faithful to the fact that they sent us here to Parliament and to the Cabinet to do a job. It's never easy, and my journey in government has had its tough times, but I've got a lot of support of my colleagues and my family and the community, and that keeps me going. Plus, the sense that you're actually doing something that's vitally important for the future of our state puts a lot of fuel in my tank, and quite honestly, the knockers, they actually just come and go, and we'll just keep going forward.
What have you learned from the Devonport fiasco?
Well, I think despite the fact that I had my own suspicions and concerns, well-founded, and my own interventions, I've learned again that you can't always just accept the advice that you're provided with. I think that's really regrettable. It's been a very unfortunate episode. Let's be honest about it, nobody was taking responsibility for it, so I chose to. I felt that was right. And, you know, that's been a lesson, not just for myself, but I think for other people. You've got to keep riding them. You've got to keep riding people and make sure that they are delivering according to what they promised.
Treasurer, thanks for speaking to Stateline.
A pleasure. Thank you, Guy.
US Vice President Kamala Harris has challenged Donald Trump to another televised debate, saying they owe it to the voters. With 54 days to go until the American election in November, Democrat VP Harris narrowly leads the polls. Debates between presidential candidates are typically an important part of the US election process, but Trump says he won't participate in another one after facing President Joe Biden back in June and then Harris earlier this week, insisting he won the Philadelphia showdown, which was watched by more than 67 million people.
As everyone saw 2 nights ago, we had a monumental victory over Comrade Kamala Harris. So because we've done 2 debates and because they were successful, there will be no third debate.
Ukraine says Russia has begun a counter-offensive, taking back territory after Kyiv's cross-border incursion into the Kursk region. It comes as the Red Cross confirms the deaths of 3 aid workers killed by Russian shelling in the eastern Donetsk.
5 weeks after Ukraine infiltrated Russia's eastern border, Moscow says it's recapturing territory after Kyiv's surprise incursion last month.
The Russians have begun counter-offensive actions. It goes according to our Ukrainian plan.
But within Ukraine, Russia continues to gain ground, pushing further into the Sumy region with energy infrastructure targeted. South in the Donetsk region, 3 workers for the International Committee of the Red Cross were killed in a strike. The aid agency hasn't said who it believes is behind the attack, but Ukraine has accused Russia of committing a war crime. It comes as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken finished a multi-country trip focused on the war.
What we learn from our Ukrainian partners will inform discussions that we'll be having with other allies.
We should continue to deliver advanced air defense systems and also, in our opinion, lift restrictions on the use of long-range weapons.
The question of whether the US will change its mind to allow Ukraine to use Western-supplied long-range weapons against targets inside Russia could soon be answered. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is on his way to meet US President Joe Biden at the White House.
This will mean that NATO countries, the United States and European countries are fighting Russia.
A warning, a change of strategy from the West would lead to dangerous escalation on the battlefield. Rani Hayman, ABC News, London.
Imagine a village with no boys or men. In Cambodia, a special all-female community is providing a safe haven for girls and women, all thanks to a former top Australian film executive. The Girls to Granny's village lies in one of Phnom Penh's most impoverished neighbourhoods, and there's hope it could provide a model for other developing countries.
Making, playing and dancing. It's show and tell time at this kindergarten in Phnom Penh. But for so many children in Cambodia, what happens outside of school is much less fun.
It's really bad because there's a lot of gangsters, a lot of people that selling drugs, and it's really scary.
It's particularly risky for young girls, so they've now got their own village complete with 50 homes, a library, and not a boy or man in sight.
When I live outside this village, my sister got harassed by other people, so we moved here. It's the safe place for us to live.
The Girls to Granny's community is home to girls, women and survivors of the Khmer Rouge, like Granny Rin.
We are so grateful and very excited, and I feel my miserable life came to an end when I moved here.
These houses cost about $3.5 grand to build, and they can house about 4 or 5 women or girls. And given just how crucial safe and secure housing is to ending the cycle of poverty, that's pretty good value.
Nearby, residents have access to schools, free meals and healthcare, all thanks to a charity founded by former Hollywood executive Scott Neeson. The Girls to Granny's Village is his latest venture, and it's already getting results, with the vast majority of girls going all the way to university.
When they see their own potential, there's no stopping them.
There's hope the village could provide a model for other countries, as the young women who live here inspire the next generation of Cambodian girls. Lauren Day, ABC News, Phnom Penh.
Gold miners have propped up the share market while interest rate cuts overseas are driving the precious metal to new heights. Here's David Chow.
The price of gold is now at its highest level ever, which is bad news if you're thinking of proposing anytime soon. But great if you happen to own lots of gold that's locked up somewhere. It's partly because of safe haven demand and the fact interest rates are coming down, which is a sign that the global economy is struggling. Last night, the European Central Bank cut its deposit rate for the second time in 3 months. It's also because Europe is a lot closer than we are when it comes to bringing inflation down closer to 2%. And the US Federal Reserve will be next in line. The Fed will most likely cut rates by 25 basis points next week. But no such luck for Australia's Reserve Bank, as our first rate cut isn't fully priced in until February. At this stage, markets are betting the RBA will cut rates 4 or 5 times by the end of next year, while the US is looking at 10 rate cuts. So with that in mind, gold miners were today's best performers, while lithium and banking stocks tumbled. All up, the All Ords rose by 0.4% today and is close to a record high, while the share market is up 1.3% for the week. Now overseas, Wall Street and European markets did well, while Japan and China went backwards. Now back to gold, its spot price has risen to a record $2,564 an ounce, while oil prices jumped 2.5% as Hurricane Francine is causing quite a bit of disruption to oil producers in the US. And finally, the Aussie dollar is buying 67.2 US cents. And that's finance.
Richmond champion Dustin Martin could revive his AFL career with the Gold Coast Suns. The Suns have met with the 3-time premiership hero just weeks after his emotional retirement from the Tigers. It comes as Brisbane heads to Sydney ahead of a knockout semi-final against the Giants tomorrow.
The last time the Lions travelled interstate to play the Giants, it didn't end well. A 54-point loss saw Brisbane's season hanging by a thread.
Our second half probably wasn't up to scratch in terms of standards and whatnot, so that was disappointing.
But the Lions turned their fortunes around to finish 5th and are now a premiership threat. There's a sense of deja vu for Josh Dunkley, who won an unlikely flag with the Western Bulldogs in 2016 after the club finished 7th.
There's so many similarities to what I've felt in 16 and even 21 at the Dogs. We finished 5th that year and went on to make a grand final, so not looking too far ahead, but hopefully, tomorrow night goes well.
Tom Papley's focus is tonight. The Swans will play the winner of the Hawks and the Power.
I'll be glued to the TV tonight. I love footy.
And he loves the Hawks too.
I think just the energy they bring, looks like they're just having fun out there.
He praised the Hawks' small forward brigade, with Nick Watson and Jack Ginnivan leading the celebrations.
He's good for the game, he's a character. It's just Ginny.
And it might not be the end for one of the game's greatest. The Suns have met with Dustin Martin to work out whether the Brownlow medalist is a good fit. Martin retired as a Tiger at the end of the home and away season, but has long been linked to the Suns, led by Martin's former coach, Damien Hardwick. Tom Maddox, ABC News.
So it ain't so, Dusty. The Western Bulldogs have slumped to their 3rd straight loss to start the AFLW season, and an injury to star Ellie Blackburn has made matters even worse for the side. Blackburn rolled her left ankle in the dying stages of the loss to the West Coast Eagles and had to be helped off the field. The club is sweating on results from scans today. Eagles young gun Ella Roberts was impressive throughout the game, picking up 23 disposals and a goal in the 11-point win at Whitten Oval. The victory has the Eagles sitting in 4th place on the ladder, with their next match against a winless Collingwood on Tuesday. Australia remains unbeaten in the group stage of the Davis Cup finals after defeating Czechia 3-0 in Valencia. Thanasi Kokkinakis won the opening match over Jakub Mensik 6-2, 6-7, 6-3. Alexei Poprin then secured victory for Australia after Thomas Mahac retired hurt. Max Purcell and Matthew Ebden finished the clean sweep with a straight sets win over Mensik and Adam Pavlicek in the doubles. Australia will play Spain on Sunday. Well, forget about space tourism. Now there's an even bigger thrill for the ultra-wealthy, space walking. History has been made with the first civilians to step into space. The mission was funded by a billionaire who launched himself and his 3-person crew into orbit aboard a privately funded rocket.
Orbiting 700 kilometres above Earth, the Polaris Dawn crew of 4 prepare the right conditions for the risky operation.
All the extensive training that they've gone through to get to this point, this has been years in the making.
For the first time, a space crew was going out of a craft without the safety of an airlock. Mission leader Jared Isaacman opted to open the hatch manually.
SpaceX copies, hatch open.
The helmet cam vision of tech billionaire Jared Isaacman, who funded the mission, shows a perfect view of our blue planet.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
The other astronaut out of the Dragon capsule hatch was SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis. Their spacewalk was the highest ever executed, hundreds of kilometres above even the International Space Station.
They have gone further from Earth than anyone since the Apollo missions. They're about 1,400 kilometres away at peak. The space station's only about 550 kilometres.
The mission has been 2 years in the making and is breaking new ground.
The riskiest part of it is that you threw away your atmosphere and then you have to rebuild it after the mission. There is no airlock.
The Polaris Dawn spacewalk is testing new technology as well as marking a milestone for private space exploration.
SpaceX has these huge ambitions of getting to Mars and making life multiplanetary. And in order to get there, we need to start somewhere.
Pushing the boundaries and preparing for a safe re-entry in 2 days' time. Jenny Lavelle, ABC News.
To the weather, and tonight's photo is from Robin Withers, who's visiting us from Brisbane and was driving around Table Cape. Thanks for this, Robin. And for any other Queenslanders visiting, boy, have we got a Tasmanian weather special for you tomorrow. 18 degrees topped the state at Larapuna in the northeast today. Launceston reached 17, Burnie had 16, Devonport 15, Hobart 14, just 11 degrees in Strawn. Rain yesterday returned to mostly being about the west. 2 millimetres fell just before dawn in both Hobart and Denali. The satellite image shows cloud moving from the west over Tasmania, but the colder air well to our south will pay a visit tomorrow as a massive high in the Southern Ocean turns our winds due south. So very cold air will blow over the state tomorrow, possibly delivering snow to the elevated suburbs of Hobart. Across the country tomorrow, rain in Melbourne, a shower or two in Canberra and fine in the other capitals, 24 degrees in Sydney before the footy tomorrow night. Back home, there'll be showers less likely about the north and contracting to the east in the evening. Small hail is possible and snow falling to around 200 metres, with flurries possible near sea level about the south during tomorrow morning. 2 to 9 millimetres for Hobart, up to 6 millimetres along the east coast and up to 10 in the west. The north, as you can see, should be mostly fine. 12 degrees for Launceston and Burnie, 13 in Devonport, just 9 in Queenstown. 12 degrees in St Helens, 11 in Swansea. Snow is likely in Oatlands tomorrow. Snow also possible in Bothwell. Hobart's heading for a top of 11 degrees after a forecast low of 5. Sunrise tomorrow, for anyone brave enough to want to get out of bed early, will be at 13 minutes past 6. On coastal waters, there'll be south to southwesterly winds of 20 to 30 knots. There are strong wind warnings for all coastal waters except the central north. There's also a road weather alert for dangerous conditions in several districts tomorrow morning. There's a bushwalkers alert for snow-covered tracks about the west and central plateau and a sheep graziers alert for the southeast. Sunday should be mostly fine after morning frost inland with showers about the west and far south. Monday, more showers about the west, south and the Bass Strait Islands. And looking ahead, a shower or two on Tuesday, with rain likely on Wednesday and more showers Thursday and Friday. And that is the bulletin. I hope you have a great weekend despite the weather. Stay warm. See you Monday.